Greetings, geeks! Adam coming at you with another Wizard Hall video. This time, we are mainly focusing on a stack of comics which I recently came across, but also I have a big Wizard surprise at the end, which I can't wait to share with you. But let's start out with some of these comics, because first up, I was recently in a back issue bin and found the first issue of Sledgehammer. If you guys don't remember Sledgehammer, it was this late 80s kind of parody of Dirty Harry. It was super funny, very clever. And this comic is actually fantastic. Like, as far as comedy comics go, it kind of pushes the envelope a little bit. And I really like that. For this era of Marvel Comics adaptations, they really pulled out all the stops. So that was something I was excited to find, and then so much happier that it was even good. Here we go with, speaking of tie-in comics, Cops issue number 2. I had quite a few of these figures back in the day. If you don't know, Bart Sears actually is one of the people who created the character designs, and his artwork was on the boxes for the Cops figures. The Cops and Crooks, a lot of people call them. They were officially titled. Here we have an issue of Wonder Man. This is Wonder Man number 2. I picked up both the newsstand and the direct market edition of Wonder Man number 1 the other day, and so it was fun to get another issue of this. I'm very curious to see how much they use as they get into the Disney Plus series whenever that materializes. Let me get more details. Recently was reading a lot of Wolverine comics as part of our Wolverine Tribute Zoom event. But this one was missing. I had like the full run nearly of the Marvel Comics Presents Sam Keith story where he's fighting Cyber, but this one in the middle was missing, and that's a pretty intense cover, so that was fun to get that. Speaking of Wolverine, how about a little Bad Rock Wolverine? So if you've been paying attention in Wizard, as part of the Heroes Reborn event, then Extreme Studios said, yes, but we also want to be able to do crossovers with your characters. And so Jim Lee did them, Rob Liefeld did them. This is one of those one-shots I'll be very interested to read and just see how terrible it can be. Check this out, speaking of Wolverine, in a different continuity, Wild Thing, Wolverine's daughter from the M2 universe. Every time I'm finding these now, I'm picking them up because I'm very... I want to be ready when we get to that in the continuity of Wizard Magazine in that era where the M2 universe existed, because I love that concept in addition, to Spider-Girl. There were a lot of interesting characters they put in there. Now, this one here, speaking of Rob Liefeld, I found a copy of Avengers number 1, which, according to his Robservations podcast, after doing some research, he found out this was the best-selling issue of Avengers ever. All right. I don't know if that was a high bar. I think that was always a fan favorite, but not in the mainstream where it was going to sell anything like, oh, yes, Jim Shooter is writing Avengers. We're going to buy 1 million copies. You know what I'm saying? So this one was hyped enough that, yes, people were going to buy a lot of copies. Now, another series that I picked up recently, I shared in another haul video, was the first few issues of the Exiles comic, because I had always wanted to read it. I went to another comic book booth, I guess you would call it, in an antique mall, and I found the later issues of Exiles, which I had totally forgotten that Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man 2099, was on that team. So I picked up like the last 4 issues here of that series, just trying to get an idea of what his involvement was, especially at the end. If he was on a cover, all the better, right? So I was excited to find that here. Then we got a Sabretooth. Again, kind of weird. Or is that Wild Child? I don't know. He always just looked like a skinnier Sabretooth. And then this was this must have been like a follow-up series. So I thought that was interesting. And actually, I skipped ahead because this was the last issue of Exiles number 100. So anyway, pretty interesting that it made it that far, right? And then I saw in the bin, I didn't pick them up, but there was the new Exiles. So I don't know if that was the previous issue, because Exiles was originally a Malibu Comics Ultraverse title. It's very confusing. Marvel bought them and then they could use the name. Another thing is I have like a near complete run of the 2099 Marvel books. But one of the ones I don't have, I have some X-Nation books, but I didn't have these later issues. So I picked up a couple of these that they had just, to have them. And maybe I do, and I just forgot. Sometimes we're just like, I don't think I have that, but it's just not a book you've checked very often. I applaud all of you who create your spreadsheets and then are able to reference your comic collection. I just go off memory. And then if I have extra issues, they come to you for giveaways. Speaking of which, somebody just bought an official Wizards t-shirt from us at tpublic.com, and we sent them a prize pack. They got an issue of Wizard. They got some comics. So I'm just saying, if you want a little something extra in addition to representing the show and sharing your love for it, just let us know. Take a picture when you get on social media with your Wizards t-shirt, and we'll send something your way. Now, some more fun things I found were some movie adaptations. So here's Superman 4: The Quest for Peace, the movie adaptation in comic form. I'm very curious to see if this has the Bizarro Superman scene that was cut from the film, if it made it into the comic. Also, picked up X-Men vs. Dracula. X-Men vs. Dracula, perfect Halloween reading, so I'm curious to see what that is. I also saw another thing that was Spider-Man Dracula when I was flipping through the books, and then I lost it. I couldn't find it again. I went back looking around. I was like, more Dracula? Oh, I missed it. But how about, speaking of Bat-themed comic characters, Batman Forever, this awesome painted cover. So I already have the first Batman and Batman Returns. Now I have Batman Forever. Got some Nicole Kidman. I mean, these are just beautifully painted. And then also, how about Batman and Robin? Is there any way to make this movie better in comic book form? We will see. Does it have just as many puns for Mr. Freeze as the live-action version? I also picked up another issue of Gen 13 with an Adam Warren cover. Now, the ones I showed in the last haul video, I realized Adam Warren was doing covers, but he wasn't doing interiors. So like on the inside here, you're not seeing any Adam Warren manga art. It's just kind of a standard look. But the thing that made this like ultimate late 90s to me, I was just trying to flip through and find it here, it just cracked me up, is there was a very popular gentleman on MTV at this time. And yes, the one and only Tom Green. Let me bring that up here. Tom Green for Right Guard Extreme. It's pretty ridiculous. And then I also picked up this issue of Spawn. I shared a photo on our social media of a signed copy, which they had. There were 2 copies. One of them was signed by Al Simmons, the guy who was Todd McFarlane's friend who inspired the name for the character. But I picked this up just to see if it tied into the movie. Really, it's just a primer for the Spawn universe. So it's like a thing where you basically, it just has a bunch of words, and it's Cogliostro, I think, just explaining like, okay, this is what happens to Spawn, so that you know what the movie is about if you want to find out more about the comics now, having watched it, type thing. But it's an official issue. It said it was issue 65, so I feel like regular readers of Spawn probably felt ripped off. I don't know. Last one here, Just a Pilgrim. Yes, this is issue number 2. I gotta find issue number 1 from Black Bull Comics. Yes, the Gareb Shamus Wizard Magazine adjacent comic book line. Look, hey, why don't we promote our magazine on the other side, Wizard 130? So again, I'm just trying to collect all these Black Bull books now because it is a piece of Wizard history, belongs in the archive. Speaking of Wizard history, all right, this is the big event, guys. So, there is a gentleman named Nicholas Baltra who is an artist who follows us on Instagram, and we've had some conversations back and forth DMing, and he reached out to me and he said, hey, would you be interested in some signed copies of Wizard Magazine? And I was like, signed copies? Now, you find signed copies occasionally that people took to conventions, like the artist that drew the cover, or that has a feature in the magazine, they'll have them sign it. But he said, no. These are signed copies I got for winning the letter envelope contest 3 times in a row. And I was like, whoa. So he was an artist, submitted his letter art, and I flipped through the issues and I found it in there. So part of the actual prize was that you would get an autographed copy of the issue that your letter art appeared in, signed by the entire Wizard staff. Okay, so this is an issue of Wizard. Let me put it over here so if you get a better look at it. Signed by Wizard staffers. So for our purposes, for having a complete archive, for having an actual prize that was awarded to a letter art winner, I mean, there's nothing cooler than this. Nicholas actually signed it himself as well, which is pretty funny. He's just like, well, yeah, I'm in the issue, right? So this was super cool, and I was very excited to find it. But in addition to that, I traded him some comics, for his collection. Have to do a fair trade. But he actually had three, because like I said, he won 3 times in a row. He kept one for himself. But he also gave me this issue, which is kind of harder to see just because, oh, there it is. Yeah. So you see like the gold signatures on top of Sting right there, right? So to have two autographed copies of Wizard, and they're signed by different staffers as well. That's the weird part. It's not like the same names all over it, even though it was just an issue apart. So thank you so much, Nicholas, for making that offer and contributing to the archives here. That is so cool. We're going to cherish those absolutely. And thank you, hey, for checking out this haul video. Be sure to follow us on social media at Wizards Comics, Wizards_comics on Instagram. Be sure you're subscribed here to Wizards Podcast on YouTube, and keep an eye out for more fun to come. But in the meantime, keep your books bagged and boarded.